What's going on, everybody? It's your boy BrianDaddy coming at you with a video. Today we have the first boss of Vault of Incarnates, Eranog. Positioning, you'll want to move him halfway between the center and the edge of the platform, and he should be moved in a counterclockwise direction each time he casts Flame Rift. Flame Rift will target several players, spawning an ad and leaving behind a pool of lava each time it expires. Place the pools behind the raid and loosely spread to avoid cleaving each other. The ads will fixate random players. You want to kill them and kite them towards the boss to allow for cleaving. During the intermission, an army of flame, when he reaches 100 energy around 90 seconds, you will spawn primal flame ads around the whole room. You will want to target and kill one ad, allowing your whole raid team to be able to escape before it closes in. On heroic, Eranog will spawn molten spikes throughout the phase. Molten spikes are destroyed each time he casts Incinerating Roar, and you will want to make sure that you are standing at least 4 yards away from each molten spike. Role-specific abilities include taunt swaps between 4 to 8 stacks, healers dispelling Incinerating Roar, and DPS using deep cooldowns during intermission and CCing ads. Next boss in the raid is Terros. Since he is stationary, tanks must always remain in melee to prevent tectonic barrage. Raid should be somewhat stacked, with ranged and melee staying pretty close to make soaking rock blast easier. Depending on which direction you choose, you can go clockwise or counterclockwise on each cast of Resonating Annihilation. And for the important abilities, Rock Blast will be cast on a random player, dealing a massive amount of damage split between nearby players. At least half your raid should help with splitting this ability. After Rock Blast is cast, move away from impact before Aftershock explodes. Awakened Earth. When it explodes, Awakened Earth pillars will appear for a few marked players' locations. It will deal damage to players standing on top of them when they spawn, and pulse damage to near the entire raid while they are alive. The number of Awakened Earth spawned by Rock Blast will increase throughout the encounter. Positioned Awakened Earth pillars in a single clump while there are less than 4 to allow tanks to destroy them with a single concussive slam. When there are more than 4 awakened pillars, split into 2 groups to lower the burst damage of Seismic Assault on the raid. Shattering Impact. Terros will target a random player and spawn a 12-yard circle under them, which will erupt and deal damage. Dodge it. Special ability. At 100 energy, about every 90 seconds, he will slam a quarter of the room, dealing lethal damage to players caught in a frontal, and causing Fractured Rubble to fall from the ceiling. Use the Demonic Gateway or raid-wide movement abilities to quickly escape the affected zone. Tanks, aim your Concussive Slam at Awakened Earth pillars to destroy them. Taunt swap after 2 casts of Concussive Slam. Healers, the raid will take burst damage when Rock Blast goes off. Pop cooldowns when that is going on. DPS, just damage the boss. On Heroic, Terros will now spawn Resonating Aftermath when Fractured Rebel falls, instead of just Resonating Annihilation. This will change because there's a lot less usable space, and will incentivize the raid to be closely stacked for each ability to minimize the space wasted. It is best to start at the edge of the slice, causing Resonating Annihilation, then slowly rotate as more space is needed. The Primal Council. Positioning-wise, there is no important things besides making sure you stack all 4 bosses together. Each boss has an ability that interacts in a specific way with at least one other ability, so understanding what they do is important. Kadros Ice Wrath channels the storm for 10 seconds, continuously applying stats of Primal Blizzard, which will deal frost damage and increase frost damage taken per stack. Upon reaching 10 stacks, players get frozen by Frost Tomb, which deals a large amount of damage to the player until they are freed. Stacks of Primal Blizzard should be cleared around 5 by stepping onto Scorched Ground. Use Primal Blizzard to clear Scorched Ground if it begins taking up too much space. Ember Fire Path. 2 players will be targeted by Meteor Axes, which deal a large amount of damage that is split between all players standing within a 10-yard indicator. The impact of the axes destroys earthen pillars and leaves behind Scorched Ground. Slashing Blaze will deal a large amount of fire damage in a frontal cone and apply a dot to any player struck. Taunt swap after each cast of Slashing Blaze to face Ember Fire Path away from all other players. Stormlash. Conductive Mark will apply to several players, dealing increased damage over 20 seconds. Walk within 5 yards of another player will spread the debuff to that player as well, and walking within an earthen pillar will safely remove your debuff. She also casts Chain Lightning, which will deal and jump to random players. Opal Fang has earthen pillars, which will spawn near players, dealing damage to anyone standing above them when they erupt. Role-specific abilities. Tanks, there will be a Crush. You will want a Taunt swap after each stack. Healers, the raid will take ramping damage during Primal Blizzard. Players with Conductive Mark will require spot healing until it's cleared. DPS use a 4-target cleave build, kind of like a Mythic Plus build. And for the heroic changes, Ember Fire Path. Do not overlap two Meteor Axes because they will deal 300% increased damage. And for Opal Fang, Earthen Pillars erupt with Quaking Pulse, continuously dealing damage to the hold raid until they are destroyed, so they will have to be dealt with. Sennarth. Positioning. Each of the 3 platforms will have similar positioning as the raid ascends to the final platform. Players should loosely spread to avoid too many players having Breath of Ice exhaled on them, or cleaving from Chilling Blast. Stay spread when running up the ramp to the next platform, and utilize the rock at the top of the platform to negate the effect of the Gossamer Burst. Important abilities. Breath of Ice. Sennarth will exile patches of icy ground to 2 random locations, preferring areas near players, causing players who stand on top of them to take periodic damage and slide. Icy grounds make movement more difficult by causing your character to slowly build up momentum in the direction you're moving in, instead of instantly responding. Enveloping Webs. Upon reaching 10 stacks, the player will become wrapped in webs and can be broken out by killing caustic spiderlings near their location. Random players will be targeted by enveloping webs, causing them to drop sticky webbing on the ground every second for 6 seconds. Standing on this reduces the player movement speed, and a stacking debuff protects them from the push-pull effect of Gossamer Burst and Repelling Burst. Gossamer Burst will be cast on all players, pulling them towards the boss. Being pulled off the ledge will cause players to be wrapped in webs. Standing on sticky webbing will prevent them from being drawn in, and it will be cast once per platform, then once right at the end of each transition. Web Blast. Tanks will take an increasing amount of damage from Web Blast, requiring taunt swaps on the boss around 5 to 7 stacks. Chilling Blast. Players will be targeted, which deals damage and explodes with Frost Expulsion. Deals a large amount of damage to players in the area and to the targeted player. Stay spread when Chilling Blast is cast to avoid cleaving other players. Adds. Frost Breath Arachnid. There will be 1 Arachnid that spawns first, second, and third platform of the encounter. One of the tanks will need to aggro this ad and hold it near the boss while facing it away from the melee and the raid for the freezing breath. Chilling Aura is a stacking debuff caused by the ad, requiring the raid to kill each ad before advancing to the next platform. Several caustic spiderlings will appear throughout the encounter, requiring damage dealers to kill them. When killed, they cast Caustic Eruption, dealing damage to players within 5 yards and removing stacks of sticky webbing. Phase 2. Upon reaching the 4th platform, it will begin channeling Apex of Ice, requiring an interrupt to stop her from ramping damage to remove her 99% damage reduction debuff. Random players will be periodically targeted with suffocating webs, which will knock them back and cause them to be wrapped in webs. Suffocating webs can be removed by players by killing a caustic spiderling near them, allowing eruption to remove the web. Icy ground will continue to force players to move around. Chilling blast leaves behind glacial plumes, which deal damage and knock players who come in contact with them. Repelling burst knocks players away instead of drawing them near like in the other phases. Role-specific abilities. Tanks swap around 5 to 7 stacks of Web Blast. Make sure you face the Arachnid away from melee. Healers, Chilling Blast, and Frost Expulsion can be dangerous if the raid isn't spread out correctly. And Sennarth will gain a ramping damage buff throughout the last platform. Gossamer Burst and Repelling Burst deal a large chunk of damage to the raid. DPS, be on top of killing ads as soon as possible. And the Caustic Spiderlings when teammates are wrapped. Dathea. Positioning-wise, there's nothing strict, but we suggest loosely spreading on one side of the boss to allow for easier healing. Important abilities. Raging Burst. Dathea will spawn Raging Tempests, which deal damage and knock players up when they come in contact. When Crosswinds is cast, all Tempests are repositioned and players caught in the path will take damage and get knocked up. Coalescing Storm. Dathea will cast this ability every 80 seconds, summoning 2 volatile infusers on the main platform. They cast Blowback when killed, causing players to be knocked 60 yards away from the ad. Mark and kill 1 infuser quickly, positioned either around the center of the platform or towards the edge to give players more space to be knocked away. After players get back in position, the second storm can be killed. Conductive Mark. The debuff is randomly applied to several players, dealing increased nature damage over 15 seconds. If the player moves within 4 yards of another player, the debuff will spread, and the duration will refresh. Stay spread throughout the encounter to prevent the debuff from jumping. Cyclone. Dathea will pull players towards herself, dealing damage continuously. If a player comes in contact with the boss, they are knocked into the air. Role specifics. Tanks. She will strike you with Zephyr Slam, dealing a large amount of damage and knocking you back. Each hit applies a debuff and increases damage taken and knockback distance. Make sure you swap after 2 stacks. Momentum canceling abilities can be used to mitigate the knockback. For healers, Cyclone will deal continuous damage and make it more likely that players will collide with Raging Tempests. Volatile infusers will pulse damage to the raid while they're alive. Damage dealers kill the infusers when they appear, and make sure you focus one while cleaving the other to stagger the knockback. On Heroic, only 1 infuser spawns on the main platform. The second spawns on a nearby platform along with a few Thunder Callers. Kill the Infuser and use the knockback to send half the raid to that platform to kill that set of adds, and use the knockback from the second one to knock you back to the main platform. Kurog Grimtotem. Positioning. You will want to remain consistent throughout each element because the tank buster is very similar in each quadrant. Tanks should position the boss near a wall to reduce the distance they are knocked back when Sundering Strike hits. The Altar of Flame. Magma Burst. Random players will be targeted with Magma Burst, causing them to take fire damage and spawn pools at their location. Pools should be spawned without overlapping them. Searing Carnage. Players are infused with fire, dropping fire pools that explode every 5 seconds, spread out to give players space to drop their pools. The Altar of Frost. A random player will be targeted and take a large amount of frost damage that is split with all players within 8 yards. That is absolute 0. As many players as possible should stand within that circle to split the damage. Biting Chill. Grimtotem will periodically debuff the entire raid, dealing damage to everyone for 10 seconds. Altar of Earth. Erupting Bedrock. Grimtotem will cause waves of earth to erupt around them and ripple in effect. The first ripple will be right around the boss, and each ring will become larger, giving players time to move over the ripple while the next one forms. Seismic Rupture. The earth erupts with random players, dealing damage, knocking them back within 10-yard indicator. Altar of Storm. Thundering Strike. Grimtotem will call down several thunderbolts, requiring players to stand in an impact locations to absorb the blast. Failing to soak Thunderstrike will cause it to deal damage to all players. Shocking Burst. Several players become charged with electricity, dealing damage to players within 12 yards after 5 seconds. Stay spread to prevent it cleaving. During the intermission, Grimtotem will take 99% reduced damage. 2 elementals will spawn based on the altars that were active during the first phase. Blazing Fiend. Magma Flow will occasionally cause lava pools to spawn around the ad. Frozen Destroyer. Frozen Binds is an interruptible cast that will deal damage and slow all players. When Freezing Tempest is cast, everyone should be within 10 yards of the ad to reduce the amount of damage taken. Tectonic Crusher. The Breaking Gravel is a tank ability applying a stacking physical damage increase to its target. Ground Shatter marks several players, causing them to deal a large amount of damage to targets within 12 yards. Run to the edges of the room when targeted. Violent Upheaval will mark random locations, knocking players up and dealing damage if they stand within 10 yards. Thundering Ravager will vanish and appear behind a random player, channeling lethal current into them. Targeted players should move further than 8 yards away from nearby allies to prevent current from chaining. Role-specific mechanics. Tanks the boss near the edge of the room to prevent the strike from knocking a player too far away. Start the boss at the Altar of Storm in Phase 1. Move to Frost, move to Earth, and then move to Flame. Healers. Damage taken by the raid will continuously increase as the raid spends time within each section. The first 2 minutes of the encounter will be very intensive because your raid will spend the entire time at the Altar of Storm, ramping up damage of a .31 stacks. DPS. Quickly kill all adds in the Altar of Earth part of the encounter, and prioritize the Frost ad during Intermission 1 and the Thunder ad during Intermission 2. Heroic ability. When the boss moves from one altar to another, he will cast Primal Shift, dealing damage to all players and applying a debuff that will make it lethal to cross again. Grimtotem unleashes waves of lava while the Altar of Flame is active. Frigid Torrent. He unleashes frozen orbs that knock players away and deal damage while Altar of Ice is active. Enveloping Earth. Grimtotem applies a healing absorb to several players while it's active. And Lightning Crash. It's a ticking debuff that deals damage to the closest player over 8 seconds. Thank you for watching. I plan on covering the final 2 bosses in separate videos to go into more detail. Have a good one. Peace!